Well, hello, everyone. My name is Dora Bradford, and I am your host for our summit entitled Bring the Sizzle Back into Your Sex Life and Never Settle for Anything Less Again. Today, I'm very excited to bring you my guest. Her name is Veronica Monet. She is an internationally acclaimed sex sexologist and relationship coach. She is also an anger and empath specialist. So she brings to us a lot of great experience and wisdom. And I can't wait to hear more about her experience. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you, Dora. I'm really glad to be here. Glad you're taking on this topic because I think it's so important.
Right, we have two issues we're going to talk about that really people don't really want to talk about, like sex
Yeah.
and conflict, right?
Right?
We, right. We often don't think about anger or conflict as something to bring a couple together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Usually, when there's a huge disagreement, what happens in the bedroom is somebody ends up in the couch or they turn back on each other, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, that's usually what happens since we don't know how to deal with it. So,
Yeah. So basically what happens is if you are suppressing your feelings, if
mhm,
you're okay, maybe you say to yourself, it's a small thing, we shouldn't be arguing about that, right? Um, and so you decide, let's not talk about that. Let's just get along. And that sounds like a great idea. And you go, you make love, you go on vacation, you spend time with the kids, you watch movies, whatever your relationship, however it's defined. But if you're actually living in the same house and it's a long-term thing, there's certain things that happen. So maybe some of those patterns work great when you're dating casually. But if you're actually in a long-term committed relationship, pushing down those what seem like minor irritations eventually can lead to a tamping down of all your emotional responses. So then you see 10, 20 years out, people are not really having that great of a sex life. Maybe they're not having a sex life at all. Or the sex that they're having feels boring. And one of the reasons the sex gets boring is because we're not being authentic. So that's why I like to help couples get real about how they feel and learn. Why is it that we don't share how we feel? Because we don't want to have a conflict. Well, I teach people how to manage their anger in a way that helps open up the conversation without damaging each other and ourselves and the relationship. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
okay. And that is so needed just because we just don't know how to navigate through it.
Yeah,
And
true.
many of us are afraid to be vulnerable, like you said, right? To actually share what's really going on inside of us.
There's an art to that. So if if my statements are you, if I say you're being and you're doing and you this and I know how you feel and you always, the conversation is doomed.
Right.
We want to be delivering I messages. I'm feeling, I feel, and then actually what's a feeling? I've taught couples sometimes, okay, you need to express an I feel statement, and then it's come out, I feel like you're a jerk. I'm sorry. You're a jerk is not a feeling. So how about I feel angry, I feel frustrated, I feel sad, I feel frightened. Those are feelings.
Mhm.
And when we start to share with our partner about how we feel, we can bring out really controversial, conflict-oriented topics, but we do it in a format that doesn't lead to conflict. The point is okay, we're having conflict. Now we need to get these tools, these communication tools, and a level of emotional intelligence to be able to navigate the topic without throwing low blows, character assassination, and labels on each other.
Mhm. Have you seen couples also keep bringing up the past? Like, even though we're talking about this particular conflict right now, oh, you did this like 2 years ago. And that just keeps resurfacing and never being resolved.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, Dora, because if something that happened in the past is still bothering you, that's important. This is not, your mission is not to forget about it, forgive and move on, put the past in the past. That's not a prescription for health. Emotional health requires us to unearth some of those things. So if we are having a resentment, we want to be able to process it. And there's various ways to do that. You can work with your own therapist or coach on your resentments, take full responsibility for your resentments because they're only harming you. But ultimately, what you're going to find is that there's probably some authentic emotion you didn't share. Maybe there's a boundary you didn't assert. This is one of the things that my anger management clients are always really shocked to learn, that anger management is about learning how to assert healthy boundaries. So when we are codependent and we're allowing our boundaries to be violated, there's a way in which it just builds up, and then maybe we explode. When we want to learn how to be in touch with ourselves, really embodied. So I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. I don't like that. I'm not going to subject myself to that. And one of the things you can do is to take a time out. You can just say, okay, I need to step away from this. But there's a way to do that. I teach a very exact formula for taking timeouts that works. A lot of people think they're taking a timeout when what they're really doing is stonewalling. They're refusing to talk about a given topic. And sometimes they use it to control. It's like, I don't want to have this conversation, so I'm taking a timeout. But then you never commit to coming back to finish that conversation. Your partner will catch on and they will stop honoring your supposed timeouts. So.
And that just builds up because we never went back to discuss that.
Yeah, I work with couples who are suffering really egregious things, like maybe there was an infidelity that took place 5 years ago and it's still an issue. And that's important to get to that. We don't want to shame the person who's still feeling bad about being lied to and cheated on. And at the same time, we don't want to we just don't want to punish the person who violated that trust either. So this whole paradigm of punishment, of who's right, who's wrong, of winning leads to power struggles in relationships that will kill the passion for sure.
Mm-hmm. When I first saw your topic about anger resulting in great sex, I only thought about, makeup sex, right? That's what came to my mind. But as women, we're afraid to be angry. We're socialized to be submissive, to not talk about our real issue, to be ladylike. What do you have to say about our anger?
So I teach anger management to people of all genders. And obviously what I'm going to say now doesn't apply to everybody who happens to have the genitalia, that's associated with a particular gender. And there's lots of people who identify as non-binary. So I just want to acknowledge that right at the gate. But by and large, people have been socialized to be male or socialized to be female. And that's really what I'm talking about, is how were you socialized? Doesn't really matter to me what you got in your pants. Doesn't really matter to me what your DNA is. But if you have been socialized to be fit in this particular role, then you're probably going to have certain patterns. And by and large, human beings who've been socialized to be male tend to have been given two emotions that they're allowed to express freely. One is anger, and the other is being sexually desirous, or you could just say horny. So if you are living in that soup, if that was how you were programmed, then if you're sad or lonely or touch deprived and just want to cuddle, you don't really find an out for that. It's more like you have to be interested in sex or you're expressing yourself angry in an angry way. Most of the people that are identified masculine that come into my practice have a tendency to use their anger to express all their emotions. So they're only angry. That's all they know how to do. And when I'm dealing with people who were raised in the feminine culture, they are more likely to turn that anger in on themselves. So you find that they're more susceptible to gaslighting. You can very easily tell somebody who was raised in feminine culture that they're imagining it, they're making a big deal out of nothing. They will go straight to the, oh, maybe I am. What's wrong with me? Maybe I instead of like going, no, actually, I don't like what you're doing. I see what you're doing and it's not working for me. So there's also a tendency for women to put that anger back into their own body. And it turns out as low self-esteem, body image issues, body shame, sexual shame, insecurity, low self-esteem, and the biggest one of all, depression.
Yes.
Not all depression is anger turned inward. Some depression is a neurochemical imbalance, and you can get that treated with, prescription. But there's also depression that just arises from anger turned inward. So a lot of times when I'm teaching anger management to women, I'm actually helping them find a way to express their anger without being self-destructive or destructive of the other person. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
It's like, how do you find your anger if you don't even know you're angry, right?
Right. Right.
I start pulling on the strings of self-doubt and low self-esteem.
And for the males, how do you, if they're so used to being in that anger stage, how do you bring them to where they can relate to all the other feelings?
It's not easy. It's not easy. But so the insistence often is, no, I'm just horny. But I have to pull on strings there. Well, what about this and what about that? And I'll tell you one thing that helps a lot actually is if I'm working with fathers. They may think all of their issues are about their partner, their wife, right? And it's very specific things. But if we start working the anger management around family dynamics, like how are you interacting with your children, this helps them to start realizing, oh, it's actually about your patterns. We can get the focus on you. But the male paradigm a lot of times is about trying to fix things out here and trying to control things out here. So the journey becomes, how do I go in? And the female culture tends to be more about, oh, I'm looking at myself, I'm monitoring my feelings, but I don't actually know how that applies to what's outside of me. Like, how would I actually create change that works for me without maybe worrying about exactly what you were talking about, Dora, stepping out of that female training to be polite, sweet, caretaking, thinking of other people, investing emotional labor for others.
Right.
Yeah.
We see that a lot in relationships or just in general, whether you're the caretaker of the family or,
Yeah.
people.
I am bisexual, and not everybody who's bisexual believes or feels this way. So I'm not trying to speak for bisexuals, but I am speaking for myself, that I feel like my brain tends to feel I've got an association with the masculine and feminine cultures, and I understand them. So when I'm working with people who are in the male culture, I can talk their language. And that becomes a real strong point for me as a coach, to be able to say, hey, my voice even changes. I got to sit like that. Swear a lot, And of course, I'm not saying that everybody who's male is like that. I'm talking about the masculine culture that's part of this dominant narrative.
Right. Because there's some men that are that they are okay with having their feminine side. They're okay
with Totally. I've met people with penises that are far more feminine than I am. I wish we had a better word. I sometimes like to use the word yin and yang. Like there's yin expressions and yang expressions, but it's not readily understood. A lot of people don't know what that means. So
True. We just tend to associate with one or the other. There's no in between.
Well, one of the things that I always want to be careful is that just because I'm talking about masculine and feminine, I don't in any way, shape, or form think those are associated with genitalia, nor do I actually think that they are immutable characteristics. I actually think they're training, and I was trained for both. So here I am.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me another way that anger can be used to have a wonderful and exciting sex life.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're feeling angry, that's a sign that you're alive. So that's a good thing. It means that you have feelings that need to be dealt with, uncovered. So the first thing is, look, people are afraid of their anger. I ask people, instead of fear, please get curious. Get curious with why you're feeling this way. And it's great to journal. It's don't take that stuff to the people you love right off the bat. You want to explore it yourself. Find out what's going on inside of me. And why am I feeling this way? And you can start pulling on those strings, and you'll start to realize, well, I thought I was just irritated about the toothpaste, or I was just irritated because they were late. But then when I start pulling on those strings, no, I'm also irritated and I'm angry. Actually, I'm very angry. I didn't know I was this angry about this other thing that happened, and it happened 5 years ago, or and I oh my gosh, I had no idea that this was all going on inside me. But as you start to really get grounded in your reality, your emotional reality, and here's the thing, you need to make a distinction. Just because you feel angry about something doesn't mean that it's even something you want to change. Don't know that yet. We have to get curious. Maybe I'm just angry because it points to another thing. Maybe some of my anger is that I'm angry at myself. Curiosity will help bring that stuff to the surface. You get more clarity. And then I also want to get curious about the connection with this other person. I wonder what they're feeling. So if I start feeling curious about my own feelings, I can start to have some curiosity about my partner's feelings. And that's as opposed to contempt. Because in relationships where there is a power struggle, we tend to get contempt for our partner's perspective, contempt for how they're behaving, for how they're feeling, for how they express themselves. And we start to see it as, I've got to convince them of my perspective. This is not how we form partnership. Partnership is really about weaving together. So this is a tantric concept. Tantric means to weave. So if I'm going to be partners, I want to weave together. And the only way I can do that is if I know what I'm bringing and know what they're bringing, and then we figure out how we want that partnership to look. All of this requires curiosity. If I can stop being afraid of what's inside myself and stop being afraid of what my partner's going to say, what do they actually think? This is why I can't tell you how many couples don't even ask each other. Don't ask each other how they feel about really key topics, but certainly not about the sex, right? People have sex with each other for 20 years and have never talked about the sex. And it's time to get curious about that. Is the sex working or not? But okay, I have a way of wandering off on all these different avenues. Getting back to your question about how can my anger accentuate my sex life? In my own personal life, it means this: I don't push the things that I'm angry about down. I find ways to process them. Not always with my partner. Sometimes I take it to a therapist or a coach or a good friend or a support group. I have lots of support groups. Not groups, but support. Lots of support. Resources. I've resourced myself so that I'm not alone. And then I decide which parts need to come to the partnership. Which parts do we need to work on together? And I teach a game that my partner and I actually invented. It's called Show Me Your Movie. And you sit down and share your perspective. And what's really great about this is it's kind of freeing. As long as you say, in my movie, you did this, it's okay. You can actually say your partners did something. But the premise is it's just my perspective. And I could be absolutely inaccurate about what you said and did. But in my movie, this is what you said and did. And this is how it hit me. And this is how it made me feel. I've led couples through this many, many times over the last 16 years of being a relationship coach. And one of the things I love witnessing is how they come in with this huge unsolvable problem, right? And it's almost always our sex life is kind of in the toilet. And then I find out that they're actually angry at each other. And then we start to unpack the conflict. And when I teach them this way of communicating, where they're just going to listen to the other person and they're going to validate and they're going to empathize instead of trying to argue, figure out what the next thing is that they're going to say as a rebuttal, and that whole thing that creates the power struggle. They actually start to hear what the other person's experience is without judgment. And it doesn't matter now who's right or wrong, because it's not even a concept. It really doesn't apply. It's how we're feeling that matters. And they will have spent 2 hours in my office unpacking how they truly feel, deeply listening to each other, empathizing with each other, not agreeing. They're not agreeing, okay? I really want to stress this point. And there's not been a solution to whatever the problem was. Maybe it was about the in-laws or holidays or the kids or money. We didn't solve the problem, and they just go home and have the best sex they've had in 10 years. Now, why does that happen? Because they got access to their emotions, and they started seeing the other person as their partner instead of their enemy.
There you go.
And what it does is it revitalizes the love and the romance that was already there, that was there in the beginning. So we're just going back and finding what was there. Now, what I can't help are people who've never actually been passionately in love with each other. If that's the case, and the marriage was a marriage of convenience, and now they're trying to figure out how to make this sex life work, that's really hard. It might even be impossible. But if they were ever in love, if they ever felt passionate on some level, maybe the sex was never that great, but the passion was there, then we can work with that.
I see.
Does that
I love that story.
does that help explain the process?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Have you ever come across any couples that have had just way too much resentment that they can't work through it?
Yes. Usually when I have hit a block, it's been that one partner no longer wanted to do their work. It wasn't so much that their resentment was great, but their stubbornness of, I don't want to actually look at me anymore. I came to couples coaching with an agenda, and my agenda was fix him or fix her. I did not come here to look at myself, and I don't have anything to change. If that was the mindset that brought them to working with me, it's going to be hard for me to help move that needle. But look, most couples come with that mindset, and I do help them move past that. Every once in a while, there's somebody who just doesn't want to work on themselves. They don't want to grow. They are very invested, not in the resentment, Dora. What I find people are invested in is being right. And being right is a very painful, lonely place to be.
Yeah. Oh, I hear about that a lot. The being right, as opposed to let's figure it out without, being enemies, like you said.
Yeah.
Because that just destroys the relationship.
And it destroys you. My dad was right, and he died right, and he died alone. It's really, I guess that was a big lesson to me, watching how right my dad was. He just gradually cut everybody out of his life, including my mother, my sister, and myself, all his grandkids. He just cut everybody out because he was right. And oh my God, I really think that is one of the reasons I'm a relationship coach. Because I was like, no, this is death. Being right is death.
Yes, most definitely. Well, I have enjoyed our conversation, Veronica. I think you had some great insight with your wonderful experience with couples.
Thank you.
Um, the relationships are so hard to sometimes maneuver, right? And get to that point. But we shouldn't be afraid of the conflict because it can really bring us back together if we do it right.
It's like this. There's no reason to be afraid of driving a car if you know how to drive a car. So please, take driving lessons and get a license. So similarly, when it comes to anger, learn about anger management. You can certainly ask somebody like me, an anger specialist, to teach you. And I take my clients through a 12-week program, and they come out the other side. Their life is it's different for the rest of their lives, which is just so fulfilling for me. But there's lots of other resources out there, and there's specific steps. It's a technology. It's a technology that anybody can learn, and it will change your life. And if you want to learn how to use that to enhance your sex life, then probably you should come over to the Shame-Free Zone, because I am the only anger specialist teaching that that I'm aware of.
Well, then I invite my guests to join come see your link for their gift.
Yes. So you want to come over to theshamefreezone.com/subscribe. But look, that's maybe too complicated. So really all you got to do is just look up Veronica Monet Shame-Free Zone. Then you'll see my website. Click on that. You'll see the free offer right there in the upper hand corner. When you click on that, it's going to take you over. All you have to do is put in your email address, and you will get immediate access to a 10,000 word book called The Exquisite Partnership Formula. And you'll also get immediate access to 3 of my top rated podcasts about sex.
Okay. So there you have it. I thank you, Veronica, for joining me today, and I invite our guests to join us for our next session. Bring the sizzle back into your Sex Life Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Thanks so much for having me here.